Enlightenment, the truth. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, click the link on the bottom right, click the notifications bell, and you'll be informed when I upload new content. So, what is enlightenment? What is the truth of enlightenment? Are there enlightened beings? Have there been in the past? Perhaps we can think of individuals from history and say they appear to be enlightened. Many people strive for that as a goal for them to achieve. I would argue that for the individual, enlightenment is the last thing you would want, because it is the end of you. Enlightenment is seeing through the illusion of you. It is a dropping away, a death of a kind for the individual self, the me, the I, the story of me. What is left, we can't say or imagine. We can try to name it, and there have been many people in history and people who are still around today that get close to pointing to what enlightenment might be. However, it's easier to say what it isn't. It is the absence of the individual story. It is the absence of me, of you. There is no filter through which you see the world. There is just the seeing of the world. And so now I will try and point to that, which is almost impossible because, of course, we are having to deal with shared concepts, ideas and experience and words. And enlightenment doesn't lend itself to description in that manner. It is more a beingness. It can't even be described as an experience, because then the natural question follows, or even the assumption being that it is an experience for an individual, because what else do we have but experience? Our awareness is through experience. We feel and think, and there are events in the world that are presented to us. We could call it the universe unfolding, and we have a reaction or a response to what is happening, and that comes through our individual identity, through our experience, our past experience, through who we are, through what we like and what we dislike, through what we accept and what we don't accept, through our different likes and dislikes. That is the filter that we see through. I would suggest that enlightenment is when that filter drops away. And this is appealing to the individual self, because we want to end our suffering, and this seems to be a way to do so, a way to transcend the human condition. But we have to realize that that need and that want to end our suffering comes from the illusionary self, and the need and want to replace it with enlightenment is an individual need and want. It is an attachment, the attachment to something that will relieve one's suffering. And so I might say when the filters of the individual self fall away, then we are at one with what is in pure being, and therefore our suffering disappears along with our story of ourself. Within our suffering disappears along with the egoic constructed individual that we believe ourselves to be. And even as I say that, it sounds appealing, but it's only appealing to me, to you. It is only appealing to something that wants something to relieve its suffering. We are in this regressive feedback position, this loop that we can't get out of, because we can only experience from our individual self, from our individual identity. And enlightenment isn't that experience. It is a dropping or melting away of the individual into what is. And with that comes a deep sense of peace. But that peace, again, here we go into the difficulties with words. It sounds appealing for the individual, but that place isn't an experience for the individual. It is the absence of the individual that is experiencing. And that leaves us in a place that we are unfamiliar with and do not know and cannot know. And if we give it any thought, for the individual self, that can be very frightening, because it is the end of that constructed identity. And we've spent a lifetime shaping and building and creating that identity. We have multiple attachments to external events, people and things, but the biggest attachment we have is to ourself, and to let that go is impossible. Why would the self want to let itself go? It's like asking the thief to arrest themselves. It isn't something that we would volunteer. This is why often you can hear the phrase that enlightenment happens despite you, not because of you. It happens through grace, not through effort. And it might not be what the individual wants, but often it is what happens regardless of the needs and goals and aims of that individual self. So where does that leave us with enlightenment? What is the truth of enlightenment? We can never know. We can perhaps move in the areas that feel nourishing to us, in terms of the people that we interact with and the books that we read and the people that we might listen to. But when the striving ends and we find peace in ourselves, only then can we even get close to a flavour of what enlightenment might be. But it isn't something that we will ever know. It isn't something we will ever own. It isn't something that adds to us, that gives us a truer and clearer perception of the world. We have to find that truth and that perception, that clarity of mind within the world, within our identified self. We can do that whilst realizing that at one level of understanding that identity is an illusion. And we rest in that dilemma. We find peace in not knowing, and we find peace in contradiction and paradox, and we find peace therefore in the world. And then what happens happens. What unfolds as it always necessarily must do. And we at some deep level recognize that we are that unfolding, and we give ourselves up to that unfolding with peace and serenity. What happens thereafter isn't our concern.